Alright, so AmmoLand just dropped an article on what ATF training involves, and for me at least, it was eye-opening. Like, I now understand a lot better on exactly why things happen. I'm going to kind of brush over, like, what ATF training involves, and then I'll get to the part where it's just like, what? How is this allowed? So first thing a new ATF agent does is get a mentor, and that makes sense. Most jobs, that's how it works. You get a mentor, they show you the ropes, they kind of get you going through it. That totally fine, totally makes sense. Second part, they got to learn about the GCA and the NFA of 68 and 34. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Then they learn that the NFA is tax code. Okay, that also makes sense. But what they don't learn about is the Constitution, which is odd, because you think an agency that basically enforces laws that may or may not be in violation of the Constitution, they'd have to have a firm understanding of Constitution. This way they know they're not inadvertently breaking the Constitution, because they're so close to the edge of infringing on the Constitution, and many will say they even are. Like, just existing, they're infringing. But we're going to back that off a little bit because, you know, we're trying to find middle ground here. We're not just trying to put up a wall. This way, if we find middle ground, they can understand what they're doing wrong. So let's pretend that their existence is not just a violation in itself. They are literally, like, right on the razor's edge of violating the Constitution. You'd think they'd have to have a huge grasp and understanding of what the Constitution is, so when they're in court, they could be like, hey, you know, he got caught with this, so in order for us to not violate the Constitution, this is how we'd like to charge him. For example, the NFA is a tax code. Everyone knows that. What is the penalty for tax code? 5 to 25%. Not $250,000 and 10 years in prison. The penalty for a machine gun or a non-registered silencer violates not just the Second Amendment. I'll roll them in right here, but punishment, I forget which one it is. I'll just roll it in right here, but basically it's like the punishment can't exceed the crime. So, a $200 tax stamp, somebody forgot to pay $200 in taxes. That's it. $200. And they're going to hit them with $250,000 and 10 years in prison? Or, in the example of a machine gun, they didn't pay a $200 tax stamp, but there's no avenue for them to pay it. So how can they even be punished for that? They would have paid it, they just don't have an avenue to pay it. So, whatever. Then the fact you can't tax a right. You think they would have to have a deep understanding of the Constitution before they could ever be an ATF agent. Remember, these people are testifying as expert witnesses, and they don't even understand the Constitution. No training whatsoever in the Constitution. So, whatever. We'll let that go because the part that, like, explains everything is coming up. So, in order for them to become an ATF agent, they need to tour. Not work at, not apprentice by, but tour a firearm facility. And that's where the light comes on. I'm like, oh, now I understand. See, I assumed they would have to apprentice somebody behind the counter for, you know, a period of time. Maybe a month, maybe a year, something like that. And I figured they would have to do 4473s with customers until they messed one up. Because everybody messes one up at some point in time. We're humans. We cannot do everything perfect. This way they have an idea of what margin of error should be allowed. Not to mention they would deal with customers that come in. And that's where it gets really weird, because they've never dealt with customers. So they don't understand exactly how incredibly difficult and how few of us actually understand firearms laws. I mean, shit. I sell firearms, and I still have a very vague understanding of firearms laws because there's so many of them, and they're so overly complicated and contradictive of each other, it's hard to know what exactly is or is not legal. I had assumed I could call the ATF agent, and he would understand them, but even then, they're like, I'm not really sure about this, I would contact a lawyer. And I'm like, what? You're literally the guy that would be charging me. How are you not sure about this? So, that's, for example, you know, without saying too much that could get myself in trouble, there are customers that come in frequently that I'm like, whoa, I'm not saying you are or are not violating the law, but you need to go home and change this immediately. For real. Like, again, without saying too much information, go home and change that. And it's not like there's criminal intent behind it. It's some little old lady that's bringing her dead husband's firearms in to sell, or some kid that thought he knew the law, and then he brings something in that may or may not be in violation of it, and there's no criminal intent. And they should have to go behind the counter for a period of time, at least until they see that, so they understand. Most people violating the law, it's not because there's criminal intent. And I believe that should be the divider right there. Is there or is there not criminal intent? If there's not criminal intent, how are you going to charge somebody with breaking the law? And see that, dude, people break the law, like, frequently. Not because of criminal intent, because their inability to understand it, because the law is so overly complicated, or they just don't know. They're not into firearms. They bought a firearm because it was a riot, and then they did some modification to it, because most things when you buy it, it's yours to do with as you please. And they do with as they please, and then they come in to sell it, and what they've done, they're completely ignorant to the fact that it violates like the NFA or the GCA or something to that effect. And the ATF agents are totally missing this. A great example would be the auto key card. I did my due diligence. I took every resource I could to make sure when I took this sponsorship, I would not be breaking the law. And everything came back clean. And then just one day, oh, nope, that's not legal. That's a machine gun. I even contacted the ATF and was like, hey, you know, I'm gave them a vague idea of what kind of product I was thinking about advertising for, and they're like, no, that doesn't count. That is just a piece of metal. It is or is not. There is no middle ground. Well, turns out there is a middle ground. So, yeah, it's... Sorry, this video is kind of rambling, but dude, a firearms tour, that is your engagement with the public, which you could just walk through an ammunition plant, taking a tour, boom, I qualify. No, they should be stuck behind the counter. Do 4473s with customers, see how incredibly easy it is to make a mistake, and see customers come in making legitimate mistakes. They are not trying to break the law. That is a legitimate mistake because of their interpretation of the law, or they just unaware of the law, so they can understand that there should be a human factor in play here. Because remember, these people are going as expert witnesses and testifying, accusing somebody of criminal intent on laws they just may or may not have understood, because they're that complicated. Your solution for the pistol brace is literally a checklist. A checklist most people will never see. Yes, I'm engaged in the politics side of firearms, so I'm aware of it. If I was not, how in the shit would I be aware of a checklist for this part I can legally buy on the internet? There would be no way I would be aware of it. Would you go door to door and knock on people's houses and be like, oh, hey, so even though this has been legal for years, now there's this checklist you have to fill out? No, they're not aware of that. They don't have a clue. There's no clue whatsoever. It's completely unintentional. Violating the law, and you're charging these people without even understanding how completely unintentional it almost always is. Like, for real. Like, I shouldn't say I've never, but out of all the times where I'm like, hey, whoa, you gotta take this home and fix this, like, immediately. Not one of those, not even one of them was like, hey, I want to violate the GCA or the NFA. They just did not know. There's no way they could have known. How do you expect them to know? Anything else in America you buy, it is yours to legally do as you please unless it is harming someone else. Firearms, from the best of my knowledge, is the only exception at all. And most people just don't understand that concept unless they grew up around firearms with a father schooling them on laws and how things should have been. Like, even me as a kid, until I understood firearms, like I had my Ruger 1022, I was stupid lucky and I didn't wind up violating the NFA, but I most certainly could have without even knowing it. Like, for real, you guys need to add putting the agent behind the counter for a period of time, like a legit, not a mock gun shop where you have agents come in and try to do straw purchases and every single one is out there to violate the NFA and has criminal intent in mind, but legitimate customers, and just see how incredibly impossible it is to stay completely compliant with the law unless you are actively engaged with the firearms politics, and there's a very small percentage of that. If you don't believe me, just look at the size of political gun channels. They're tiny. Now, channels that don't touch politics, like Demo Ranch or Kentucky Ballistics, they explode because nobody cares about the politics. They just don't want to hear it. Most people, if they hear gun politics, they vomit. They actively avoid it. And how do you expect those people to understand the law and accuse them of criminal intent when there's like a 99% chance they just didn't know? And I feel that is so missing from the ATF. I am willing to bet, like most of their cases, including auto key card, I know this for a fact, there was no criminal intent there whatsoever. The party thought he was completely compliant, did all of his research, talked to the lawyers, yes, came back 100% compliant, and now you're accusing him of criminal intent? How many other people get slayed on a daily basis for criminal intent when they just didn't know it was a legitimate mistake? And you don't have the ability to judge whether or not it was a legitimate mistake, so I'm assuming you just automatically default to criminal intent. Criminal intent. Criminal intent. Oh, little old lady selling an old shotgun that has an 18.25-inch barrel? Criminal intent. Oh, somebody put a vertical forward grip on a pistol? Criminal intent. How in the hell would you know? How would you know that it's not allowed to have a vertical grip on a pistol when SBRs have vertical grips? So they see pictures of vertical grips on the internet, and then they buy this blade or this pistol brace, and for all they know that they can do whatever they want with it because it's their property. They put a vertical forward grip on it. Some officer knows it's illegal, and now you run them for, what, 10 years and $250,000? Jesus Christ! Like, oh my God, I had no idea that their training was so little. One business day tour. That's it. That's all their training is with real people. And they probably go to like Winchester Ammunition Factory where they never once see a real legitimate person. It's like martial arts. Like all those stupid ones where they're like moving in slow motion. I'm going to take your arm and I'm going to bend it back this way and I win. Or I'm going to hold you in this grip and then you can't get away and I can drive you around, and then they actually go against somebody that's like, no, I'm getting away, and they get their ass handed to them. It's the same thing. Like, mock gun shops with fake ATF agents as customers is not the real deal. That is not an accurate of how the general public is. You need to go into a gun shop to understand how easy it is to violate the law and how frequently it happens. And with 4473s, how easy it is to make a mistake on both sides of the counter. Like, they should have to do 4473s with real customers until they legitimately make a mistake so they can understand the margin of error and the human factor. Again, same with like customers. Like, there's a human factor, a big human factor that's totally being ignored, and it's being chalked up as criminal intent. Anyways, I'm just going to cut this off as I can rant on this forever. But thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like to help support the channel, Patreon, affiliate links like usual.